Hey, hello Advanced Anatomy and Physiology gang. Thank you for the work during week 1. I know we sort of hit the ground running. Hopefully a little bit of this should be familiar. Canvas, because you probably had it before in other courses, is less of a struggle. I'm also currently teaching a couple sections of general anatomy and physiology. And for those folks, every single thing is brand new. And I definitely appreciate the journey and the arc, and the efforts in all of your previous classes do pay off, especially those science courses like microbiology and general A&P that are super content heavy. Quick reminder, you can do this. It's a semester. It's not a sprint, so little gradual improvements week by week. And I know the format's a little bit different here than it was before, and that's because the professional programs have asked all the service courses to help students create skills with different learning modalities. So rather than just giving you the script, which is every word that you're responsible for during program and beyond in continuing education, you'll be given lectures, you'll be doing online stuff. There'll be a lot of different ways that content is delivered to you. So in terms of just learning the content, awesome. And as you can see, that this is really some cool stuff, but also in terms of becoming a student, your chops will be better and you'll have some transferable skills. I'm always around if you need me. You can text, you can email, phone call, perfect. If I don't have your name on my phone, I usually ignore numbers that I don't recognize, but we can definitely communicate if you want. So as you know, this week we've got a couple things to do for lecture. There is a video kind of on the basics of how cells live their lives. That's the cell cycle. And then there's a little bit in that video on how cells reproduce, either for sexual purposes, for producing egg cells or sperm cells. That's called meiosis, or for repairing or replacing or growing or maintaining, and that's called mitosis. So there's that video. It's the start of a couple of week series on cells. And then there's also a video on ploidy, which deals with chromosome numbers. And we were introduced a little bit to chromosome numbers in general anatomy and physiology. The average human condition is to have 46 chromosomes, 2 copies of each type, 1 from each parent essentially. And we'll use that information as we start to cycle through cells, and as we start to cycle through sex, and as we start to cycle through cancer. The ploidy will figure in. Those 2 chunks of content will be quizzable on Sunday to Monday. So your lecture quiz will have 10 questions. You'll have 10 minutes to take it, as always. And there'll probably roughly be like 5 questions from each of those content areas. It'll wax and wane, maybe 6 and 4, maybe 7 and 3. But please be responsible for all of that. For lab this week, which is brand new, you'll need to be on Connect. And I took a look today and I see some of you have been in there digging around, and I see others of you still have not yet gotten onto Connect. And the time management is for you. This course is asynchronous, which is beautiful. It gives you the power to do it when you want to. But we are on Wednesday already, and there's a lot of stuff to do for lab. So the sooner you hop on there, the better. For lab, I'm going to ask you to watch 2 kind of short videos. One is sort of on the structure of DNA. So we've been talking about DNA for semesters. We just sometimes say that, and sometimes we don't know what we're really talking about. But one of the videos kind of deals with the chemistry of DNA and what it really does. The other video for lab also takes into consideration the structure of chemistry, but it talks about how things are organized. It talks about the concept of a gene, which is essentially a sequence that's responsible for producing proteins. And then, because we're not all genetically identical, what that means is that, sorry about that, my phone's dying. Because we're not all genetically identical, that implies that those genes that produce proteins and peptides come in different forms. And the different forms of those genes are called alleles. And we inherit DNA and alleles from our parents. And once you get those 2 videos down, I'd like you to do a simulation. So the beauty of Connect is that it allows us to actually do things. There's a heredity simulation, and it's going to take you a little while to get through it, just like it should. It's still not going to be the same as a 3-hour lab, but please walk through the heredity simulation. Now, a couple of things. I'd highly recommend you go through it a couple of times, and there will be stops and starts. There'll be trial and error, just like there is in a real lab, and you may get a little bit frustrated, but I promise you it does work. So it's up to you to navigate your way through that. Take notes as you're doing the simulation. Just as important as doing the simulation is the introduction page of the simulation. It talks about a lot of things. It talks about sex-linked traits. Please know those definitions. And there's a whole list of definitions that will help make the way or pave the way for success in this week's lab. If you take a look at the introduction page, there are terms like homologous, dominant, recessive, heterozygous. You absolutely must be responsible for knowing those terms because all of the content depends on that base knowledge. So in addition to the 2 videos, one on DNA structure, one on ploidy, and the simulation, there will also be, with that material, there will also be a couple of questions on probabilities of offspring. So when you consider 2 parents and you consider a gene or a recipe for a single trait, and you consider the alleles, the different types of recipes for that single trait, and when we look at forming and getting sperm cells and egg cells together to provide offspring or to produce offspring, and knowing what those offspring will inherit, then we can make predictions about the genotype, which is the DNA that's contained within our cells, and what the genotype, what that DNA means for the phenotype. And phenotype is the expression of the genes. And we're much more common with phenotype because we see it in ourselves, we see it in each other. Like eye color is the phenotype dependent upon the genes for eye color. Hair color, height, there's a whole bunch, attached earlobes, widow's peaks, blood types, there's all of this stuff that we'll work through. So in preparation for the lab quiz, please go through the DNA structure video, please go through the genes allele video, please do the simulation, and I've also, please hear me on this, I've also included some practice problems and some sample videos for how to think about probability of gene distribution in offspring. So you'll also have, for the first time, you'll have a lab quiz. It will be in Connect. So the same place that you find the simulation, you'll find the lab quiz, and actually all the lab quizzes for the entire semester. There is a practice quiz in the lab in Connect just to help you get used to it because it's a little bit different than Canvas, and I've set that to unlimited, so it might not be a bad idea to take the practice quiz a couple times just to get used to the mechanics. I know it sounds a little bit more than it really is, so this week for lecture, again, to recap, cell cycle, mitosis, meiosis video, ploidy video for lecture. For lab, you've got DNA structure, alleles, and a simulation with some probability problems for the lab quiz as well. Hang in here. So we're in week 2 right now. After week 3, and I don't want you to think about week 3 quite yet because there's a lot of stuff to do. After week 3, we'll have our first exam. And I know it sounds like it's coming up fast, but it's a good opportunity with much less content than a normal exam will have to get off to a good start. So this week, focus on the quizzes, focus on learning that material as best you can. And I know it's a lot, I promise it will be relevant. And then reach out with any questions. If you're still not checking your email a couple times a day, might not be a bad idea to do that. I know it sounds like a lot, but this is how we communicate. And the official mode of communication for St. Kate's is email. I appreciate the work. Have a great day, folks. I'm here if you need me.